Hey co-stars, welcome to the show, and today we are going to talk about that ship from the last Star Trek series under executive producer Rick Berman. You know, the one with the cheesy theme song.
It's been a long road.
Getting from there to here. Oh, yes. So that show featured a very early starship with the name Enterprise, and it was pretty revolutionary for humankind. You're going to find out why in this video. So this is 10 features of the NX class Enterprise. Number 1, the Warp 5 engine. Now I had to start with this one because this is what made the Enterprise so special. It was the first Earth starship with a Warp 5 engine. Now warp drive was invented by Zephram Cochrane, and he was a busy guy, even though he spent a lot of time training pigs to round up sheep, getting drunk, and dancing to rock and roll. He somehow managed to find time to design a starship that could travel at the speed of light, warp drive. But you know what? It turns out the speed of light isn't that fast after all. It would still take you years, if not decades, to get anywhere meaningful in space. And human beings don't have the attention span for that. Most people can't even manage a 10-minute subway ride without playing Candy Crush. Can you imagine decades of Candy Crush on a spaceship? Oh my god, that would drive me crazy. And the humans in Star Trek thought so too, so they developed the technology and they invented the Warp 5 engine, which could go around about 200 times the speed of light. And contrary to what you might think, Warp 5 is actually double the speed of Warp 4. That's what this diagram shows. I'm too dumb to understand it, but maybe you do. Anyway, the Warp 5 engine was kind of lame at first.
Sorry, Trip, but we need a little more speed.
I don't know how much more I can give you.
It's called a Warp 5 engine.
On paper.
But after testing and modifications, it really could reach a cruising speed of Warp 5. The engine was horizontal like the warp core on the earlier Constitution-class starships, and it featured control panels mounted directly on the engine. It also had these wood-burning stoves to keep the crew warm. Alright, that was a joke. Moving on. Number 2, polarized hull plating. If you've watched Star Trek Enterprise, chances are you've heard them say this.
Polarize the hull plating.
In the 22nd century, before Earth had deflector shield technology, polarized hull plating was the primary method for defense of a starship. The NX-01 Enterprise had a polarization matrix embedded in the hull, where they could run electromagnetic energy through the hull plating, which made it many times harder than it otherwise would be, and it could withstand weapons fire. Polarized hull plating could also be used to protect the crew from neutronic storms. But compared to actual shields, polarized hull plating didn't work that well. Number 3, Spatial Torpedoes. Alright, now we're getting into some weapons. So Spatial Torpedoes were the first weapon that the Enterprise has access to on the mission. You can see them here in the armory, and at the beginning their targeting system wasn't all that accurate. The Enterprise crew found these torpedoes not that useful when trying to fight species with more advanced technologies. A torpedo could easily bounce off of a ship's deflector shield and then just explode in space. Or due to their slow speed, the torpedo could easily be targeted by the opponent's weapons and just blown up before it hit its target. Thus, it was quite fortunate that the Enterprise got hold of some other weapons. Number 4, phase cannons. So because spatial torpedoes were kind of a joke, the Enterprise needed some more potent weapons. Now, originally, phase cannons were supposed to be installed on the ship, but for some reason, like some other shoddy work that Starfleet do, they didn't get finished on time, so the Enterprise crew had to install them themselves. Now with any weapon, recoil can be an issue. And the first time the Enterprise's phase cannons were test fired, the plasma recoil blew out relays across 2 decks. Now this was due to a power overload, but the crew found a way to neutralize the recoil and overload the weapons safely, thus they were effective when fighting more technologically advanced enemies. Once the phase cannons knocked out the shields, you could follow up with a couple of spatial torpedoes to finish the job. But there was an even better type of torpedo. Number 5, photonic torpedoes. Now you may think that this sounds very similar to photon torpedoes, and you would be right, because photonic torpedoes were basically the precursor to the photon torpedo, which was the workhorse weapon of Starfleet for the 23rd and 24th centuries. Here is what Malcolm Reed says about the photonic torpedo when the Enterprise receives its first payload of the weapon at the end of Season 2.
Photonic torpedoes. Their range is over 50 times greater than our conventional torpedoes, and they have a variable yield. They can knock the comrade off a shuttle pod without scratching the hull, or they can put a 3-kilometer crater into an asteroid.
And this new weapon came as a surprise to the Klingons.
What was that? Antimatter warheads.
It served to even out the playing field between the NX-class Enterprise and a Klingon bird of prey. Although the Klingon weapons and shields were still more advanced, the Enterprise was able to destroy a bird of prey with photonic torpedoes and some clever maneuvering to get behind the ship and take advantage when the Klingons had diverted all power to forward shields, leaving their aft portion defenseless. Number 6. Subspace amplifiers. Subspace amplifiers were basically subspace relay stations to amplify a subspace communication signal across the expanse of space. Think of it as like a 22nd century version of a communication satellite. These subspace amplifiers were launched by the Enterprise throughout its mission, so the crew could access Earth's communication network, which probably meant watching TikToks, cat videos, and perhaps fail videos on YouTube. And that video reminds me of our next feature. Number 7. Shuttle pods. Now the NX class was equipped with 2 shuttle pods. Guess what they were called? Shuttlebod 1 and Shuttlebod 2. Creative names didn't come until the 23rd century. Although there were only 2 shuttle pods, there were actually 4 shuttle pod bays, which leads people to presume that perhaps there were actually 4 shuttle pods and 2 were just kept in storage, and they only used 2 of them throughout the show. Since it was a time before tractor beams, shuttle docking was a manual affair. The docking arm would come down and physically latch onto the shuttle pod, pulling it in. And this proved dangerous if you had to dock, say, in the middle of a battle. Number 8. The catwalk. No, this was not where they conducted the weekly fashion show aboard the Enterprise. The catwalk was actually an area inside the warp nacelle where the crew could shelter from neutronic storms. It was encased in a metal called osmium alloy, which, although you might think like vibranium is completely made up, it actually isn't. Look, here's what it looks like. Whether it could protect you from any kind of radiation out in space, I don't know. But anyway, in the episode entitled The Catwalk, the Enterprise crew spend something like 8 days inside this catwalk area within the warp nacelle, encased in this osmium alloy, being protected from a neutronic storm. Oh, and maybe they did do a few fashion shows while they were there, but you need the DVD with the deleted scenes for that. Number 9. The grappler. Now, like we said, the NX-01 Enterprise existed in the time before tractor beams. The Vulcans had them, but for some reason they wouldn't share them with Earth. Anyway, let's move on. So the humans, being very creative, invented this sort of magnetic grappling device called the grappler that could be used to grab other ships, retrieve crashed shuttle pods, or just destroy stuff. They even use it for what I think is one of the most unrealistic maneuvers I have ever seen in Star Trek. Having a crew member climb down the grappler's wire between 2 starships whilst traveling at warp in order to get from one ship to the other. And now it is time for our number 10 feature of the NX-01 Enterprise. They had Seth MacFarlane as an engineering officer. Okay, that was only a joke. Although that cameo is real, Seth MacFarlane really was in Star Trek Enterprise. But now, let's take a look at our real number 10, NX-01 refit. Now, we never saw this in the show because it was cancelled after Season 4, but one idea from Doug Drexler was that at the end of Season 4, the Enterprise would go in for a refit. This refit would give the Enterprise an engineering hull like the Enterprise NCC-1701, the Constitution class, and thus connect the design stylistically with the rest of the Star Trek universe. Sadly, we never got to see it on screen because obviously the show got cancelled, but we did get that one CG render of it which actually appeared on the Star Trek Ships of the Line calendar. Alright guys, that is my 10 features of the NX-01 class Enterprise. I hope you liked it. Please leave your comments below, let me know any features that I have missed. I would love you to add to the conversation. As always, please subscribe to our channel if you are new, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.